Welcome back to Off the Wire, the podcast that helps you curb cybersecurity risk and tackle technology challenges. We are Anthony and Tanner, two IT executives leading medium-sized companies with a combined 35 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity. Welcome back to the podcast. We talked about this a little bit last week. We on our podcast we said, hey, we've got a giveaway, just kind of a appreciation, I think. Without the listeners, there's really no reason for us to do that. So we really appreciate those that give us a listen. And we're coming up, we got our 20th episode, and I think we're coming up right about 1,000 downloads as well. So I thought it was just kind of a cool kind of milestone, dual milestone, to potentially do a little giveaway here and give back to those that are listening to us. We got 3 awesome prizes. I think Anthony's actually got one he's going to be able to show if you're watching this on video. So it's an Icon locking flex head ratchet, so we're excited about that. And then in addition, we got a Wera ratcheting screwdriver, which is always handy. You know, us technology guys, we're always either losing a screwdriver, plus a lot of times we have pretty cheap ones. This is a really, really nice one. And then some Anker wireless earbuds. So we got 3 prizes we're giving away. Pretty simple way to be eligible to get one of these prizes. Number 1, review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to. So if you listen to us on Apple or you listen to us on Spotify, just leave us a review. Number 2, just share this week's episode on whatever social media you'd like. Most people might use LinkedIn, but Twitter or Facebook or whatever. Just share this podcast. And then all you have to do is email us at show@offthewirepodcast and just tell us that you've done those so we can verify. Without that, it would be very hard to verify, especially on the social media part, if you've shared the podcast. So review the podcast, share the podcast on whatever social media platform you'd like, and just email us at show@offthewirepodcast.com to let us know you did that. We'll do a video drawing August 16th. That's like basically a week and a half after this episode drops, and we'll post that to social media channels. And of course, for the winners, we'll reach out to them directly and get those prizes sent to them. So excited about that. So Anthony, kind of a follow-up on CrowdStrike. We were kind of chatting right before the show. There's been some grumbling. The CrowdStrike issue is not going away. I think I was talking to you a little bit. There's actually some litigation happening. Never would have thought that cybersecurity technology would spawn litigation, at least when you're not being compromised, but here we are.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing that there's a class action lawsuit is it from Delta? I believe it's from Delta. Is that
against Delta. Yeah, against Delta.
Against Delta.
Yeah.
From all the people that missed their flights and
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I guess we all go to an airport thinking if we have a delay, it's part of the thing that happens, but I don't think the second thought I have is if there is a delay, I'm going to a class action, but this I think was extreme circumstances.
Yeah. It makes me think back to the Colonial Pipeline. I didn't hear of any lawsuits, about that. I mean, to me, I guess more individuals, well, I don't know, are more individuals. I guess more people were directly impacted with the flights, but there's a lot of scenarios to where it can impact people. I mean, I guess is this something that the future there's going to be more to come?
Yeah, they so not only are they being sued by the passengers, I guess, for all the the delays, them not getting what they felt were the benefits that they deserved, hotels, vouchers for changing their flights, things like that. But they're actually going out on the attack. I don't know if you saw that. Then they're actually suing, or going to be suing CrowdStrike. They said that in their briefing they were going to be filing a suit against CrowdStrike they said they lost $500 million of revenue from this CrowdStrike outage, which I assume CrowdStrike has some language in that contract that precludes them from damages there, but it's a brave new world we live in.
Yeah. Even if they do have that language, they're going to have to defend themselves. So this is going to cost them a ton of money.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point. I mean, just their legal team alone is probably going to be, I can't imagine it being, not $1 million plus, even for a small lawsuit, especially with their legal team. We all know how much lawyers charge, and, you kind of come to them when you're in a pickle. So maybe it's worth what they charge. I never thought about this. You know, we were kind of chatting before, like I said, before the show. I never thought about being like liable for a technology outage at whatever business. So, you know, for all those that are listening, I don't know if hopefully this is not something that, you know, gets litigated and potentially, I mean, if it goes against Delta, you know, from that passenger class action, that's definitely different because it kind of puts us in a weird place. You know, I mean, we and you, we're work for utilities that are providing power, but there's local governments, there's many small businesses that are providing services to people. I can't imagine if someone walked in and was like, you know, you didn't provide me that service and this caused me damage. I mean, how many businesses rely on power or those other things?
Yeah, this could definitely set a precedence. So honestly, hope it doesn't succeed.
Yeah. So I guess you know, moving kind of going on to the topic. For those that are you know listening on podcasts, I'm sure you read the topic when you clicked on the episode, but we titled this "Guardians of the Email Galaxy," so a little movie reference there. But Guardians of the Email Galaxy, DKIM, SPF, and DMARC. These are kind of our primary ways to protect email. Why should we go through actually implementing these kind of technologies?
You know, we talk about the fundamentals quite a bit, and really, this is just some of the fundamentals with email. You know, you hear about all these attacks that are coming through email, and these three tools, they basically help thwart people trying to spoof your domain. If you don't have these tools properly implemented, people can easily spoof your domain. This is one of those things where, you know, there's spoofed emails. There's about 3.1 billion spoofed emails. When I was researching this, is what they're saying per day. The reason that happens is because people don't have the stuff set up properly. I don't know why, but the movie reference, Full Metal Jacket, comes to mind when the guy had the unlocked footlocker and the drill sergeant found the jelly donut. Anyways, if everyone was implementing these tools, you know, like this wouldn't be an issue with all these spoofed emails. So I think it's something surprisingly that you'll find some larger organizations that don't have this. Like there's a lot of people that either they aren't aware of it or they think they have it and they don't, or they don't have all three set up properly. So I think it's a good topic for us to talk, and there's a few tools that we'll speak of to help people check to make sure that they're set up properly. And it's just one of those things that's it's not a whole lot of work. You do have to be very careful configuring your DNS records, but it's not something complicated. There's a lot of tools out there, a lot of articles published, and it's just something you need to make sure that every organization is doing.
Yeah, something I thought about a lot is sometimes I think this is one of those things. There's kind of levels of kind of technology and how big those technology pieces are in whatever organization it is, and kind of how high they rise to the surface and kind of in your purview. This is kind of one of those things where it's kind of in the background. I mean, it's there, but you maybe think like a vendor's taking care of this for you.
Hmm.
And they may be very well, you know, depending on who you have your email through, that may be doing some of this for you, but you need to make sure that you know that you have it on. Yeah, I think we got some interesting tools to kind of talk through that. You were telling me a story though, about how you maybe were on the other side of this at one point a little bit. So maybe enlighten the viewers on that.
Yeah. In my early IT days, I did some moonlighting, and I'm not going to name the organization, but basically, they would buy mailing lists, and they would. It was kind of like a who's organization. I'll just kind of leave it at that, and they would reach out to folks and offer to, you know, publish articles about them. You know, flattering articles. And anyways, you know, they would buy these mailing lists, and their whole job, the whole business ran off of, you know, those people reaching out and you know, paying for the service. And you know, my job was to make sure those emails did not get marked as spam. And matter of fact, when this happened, this was in the early 2000s, and it was kind of when SPF just kind of it was a newer thing at that time, and a lot of people didn't do it. And I remember that was one of the first things, you know, we had to do is just set up the SPF record. So it wasn't, you know, they weren't doing anything illegal or anything like that. It's kind of, but they were definitely bulk emailing folks, and you know, it was my job to make sure that those emails went through.
Yeah, let me Speaking of that, I think I have my Who's Who's book right over here where I've been published. No, I'm kidding. I do remember those actually. I don't remember when I started getting those, but I definitely got some of those, and I cannot remember exactly when. But yeah, you know what? We'll give you a pass. I think you know, you're on the other side of it now. You know, trying to defend. So
I was a
uh,
young man.
yeah, we'll let you pass on that one. But I thought that was a pretty interesting story. So like, you know, kind of I guess with our movie reference, right? With the Guardians, like who are our Guardians? Really, like we said, it's SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. So you kind of opened the conversation about SPF. Talk us through SPF and how we go about the process, like where it got started, those kinds of things.
Okay. So for SPF, one, I had to look this up. I've used it and been familiar with it, but did not know what it stood for. It stands for Sender Policy Framework. And, you know, this is one of those things that first appeared in the early 2000s. And this is basically just an email authentication tool. All three of these tools revolve around DNS entries. So for this, it's a DNS entry, it's a TXT file in your DNS, and it points to either the domains or the IP addresses that are allowed to send emails on behalf of your domain. So that's something you definitely want to have out there, because without it, you know, someone can easily spoof your email address or your domain and do that. And then also in it, there's a couple of options. There's several options, but the main one that you're going to want to do is at the end of it, there'll be like an example is you would have the IP. There's a little more to it than that, but you have the IP, and at the end you'd have like a dash all, and the dash basically says that, you know, if someone receives an email and it's coming from an IP different than in this DNS entry, that it's going to be a hard fail. If you do a plus all, that's a pass, and then if you do a tilde, that's just a neutral, a soft fail. So typically what will happen is, so if you got a fail, you know, they should basically just reject the email. Pass, you know, technically it would more likely come to your inbox. And with the tilde, the neutral soft fail, typically it would go to your junk email. And a little bit later on, we're going to cover DMARC and how it ties into this, because both SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, they really kind of all play into each other. Tanner, I think you mentioned you had a Gmail story about this earlier.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I have a few. Obviously, as SPF was kind of rolling out, we had it in place, but some of the major email providers, you know, they rolled it out at different, you know, intervals. So obviously, I guess when you have that many users on a particular platform, you can't just like blatantly make changes. You know, one nice thing I think the small medium business kind of gets spoiled is the ability just to make a change, just, you know, almost willy nilly. You can't really do that when you might have, you know, 100 million people using your email. So anyway, Google finally went down the path of actually failing these records, and we at that time, you know, we didn't have things, you know, not set up like we should, and we were unable to send a majority of our members email. Majority of our members, you know, using the Gmail service. I think Yahoo is probably second. I haven't checked the overall, you know, global standings, I guess, in a while, but we had to fix that really, really quickly. Considering that, I think about at the time, I think it was 50 or 60% of the people that we wanted to talk to were on that platform. So got that done. So SPF really critical. You know, you talked about these are records that we're creating that basically tells other people, you know, these are where my email is coming from, and if it's not me, or if it's not coming from these, it's not me. So, you know, block it, please. Something that I think people forget, and I know we were talking a little bit pre-show, is there's also some intricacies to SPF, especially if you use any type of marketing platforms. Do you want to maybe talk a few minutes on that?
With SPF, so, you know, if you have a hosted email system, like if you're using Exchange, I know there's still a few people out there doing that. You know, you would have the IP address, the public IP address of your Exchange server. If you're using Gmail or Microsoft 365, you know, you're going to have that domain listed in your SPF record. But like if you're doing using some third party for sending out emails, you're also going to have it listed, you know, in the domain that's associated with that. So all of that will reside in that file or in that record.
And you talked a little bit about this, but like, why is it important that we whitelist ourselves. Obviously, I think the main reason be just spam prevention. But I think there's some maybe ancillary reasons of why we should be doing this.
Yeah, with SPF, the main reason you want to do this is you don't want people spoofing your email address. How bad would it look? So like I work at an electric company. If we had people that were using our domain and sending out stuff to people, people are going to lose trust with us. And that's a big deal. We take a lot of pride in our reputation and have done a lot of work to upkeep our reputation. So, doing something with SPF, just such a little thing to accomplish, it doesn't take a whole lot. Matter of fact, at the when we post this show, we're going to post some links to some free tools. One's DMARCLY, but they have a SPF generator that works very well. But anyways, you need to do this stuff to protect yourself and protect your reputation, because it would be nothing worse than to have to apologize to the people that you work with, the vendors that you work with, or your customers, and saying, I apologize, this isn't really coming from us, even though it says it's coming from us. That would be a big embarrassment.
That's a great point, Anthony. Our businesses, I mean, really all businesses, right, are built on trust. At least trust, in whoever's communicating with me is that person. I know our industry specifically deal a lot with like scams. So maintaining that trust and maintaining that, trust and communication is pretty critical. So our second guardian, I guess you might say, is DKIM. So domain keys identified mail. And Anthony, we were talking a little bit about this. This is kind of like, in my opinion, I guess a little more of a step up. Obviously, SPF is really critical as well, but anything that involves encryption is pretty interesting, right?
Yeah. So DKIM, this uses digital signatures, and one, it can be used to make sure that you are who you say you are, but also it addresses to make sure that the emails that you're sending, that they haven't been tampered with. So the non-repudiation. So in this situation, how that works is the sending server, it sends its private key, and then the receiver, they look up the public key from the DNS record. All of these revolve around DNS records. So this helps your email get delivered. There's some folks that where if you don't have this, they might block you or put you in the junk email. So, if you do this, your emails, they're rarely going to go to spam if you're setting this up. So if you use a hosted provider, so if you're using Microsoft 365 or Google for your email, they automatically do this for you. So if you're hosting your own email, you need to make sure that you set this up yourself.
So at least the three we were going to talk a lot about, and we got kind of an extra. So there's an extra guardian. We'll talk a little bit about in a minute, kind of bonus guardian. But the other really big one in the room, kind of the really big gorilla, and really the combination of the first two, is DMARC and this ability to kind of report. I mean, if these things are happening, these rejections, fails, this kind of, for lack of a better word, checksumming of email, really. And what do we do if that doesn't work, if that does fail, if people are trying to spoof, and how do we know about it?
Before we go into it, just want to kind of spell it out. Some of these, we've been using them for years, but I had to look up to see what they stand for. But DMARC, it stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. So this is the authentication method built on top of SPF and DKIM. So, basically it'll look at SPF first, and if you pass or fail it basically dictates what the action is going to be taken. And the same with DKIM. So, if you got an email that fails either of these checks, you can reject, or you can quarantine, or you can do nothing. Obviously you don't want to do nothing with this. You either, at the very least you want to reject it, or you want to consider quarantining that email. This was built by some big entities. This was built in 2012 by Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, which you don't hear of too much lately, and PayPal. And they basically got together and built this protocol to help stop email abuse. So like I mentioned, the first thing it checks is SPF, and then it checks for DKIM. And then finally after that, it looks at your DNS record to see what you have in there. Do you want them to quarantine, or do you want them to reject the email, or do you want them to do nothing? If you have this set to do nothing or none, that's really not properly having this implemented. You might have it in there initially if you're testing, like that would be the main reason. But typically you're going to want to either reject or quarantine, tell the folks that, if they fail this to do one of those two things. And why this is important. So this can impact your domain sender score. So whether you know that or not, you have a domain sender score. And basically, if you look at that, depending on your score is where you're going to get cut off and marked as spam. Each of us, will have this set up uniquely. So like in Microsoft 365, that's actually in your email filtering settings. So you can decide which score. I think by default it might be a 5. I might be off. I know we had ours cranked up, trying to stop some stuff, but by default, it's at a certain level. But so you can tailor that, and so you really want to keep that score low to ensure that you're getting through to folks.
Yeah, and one thing I would add here, something we did a while back, and I don't I don't think this is required, but it really kind of ties in just to what you said. Is that when we're sending a lot of emails, and some organizations send a lot of email, some organizations don't send them, but we're well in excess of 100,000 email a month. We were always a little concerned that with the automation of spam filtering or a spam filtering list, now, and we use them, we point our spam filtering at a lot of automated lists for blacklist, and they're updated all the time, and we're automatically blocking any email on there. But with the automation of that, we were always a little concerned that our corporate domain could be blocked. So since we send a lot of email, we've actually created another domain, and we converted it a few years back to actually send all of our mass email. And our idea, I'm not sure if this is a solid idea or if something that doesn't help us a whole lot, but our idea was that if we ever got marked as spam, then we at least had our corporate domain to kind of take action, right? To contact the companies and say, hey, this domain isn't spam. We're a legitimate entity. Here's our proof. We just didn't want to get our corporate email blocked and have a situation because, me and you were talking a little bit. A lot of these support portals, they're email based only. You're not doing a lot of calling and getting your local agent. So anyway, that's something out there. I'm not saying everyone really needs to do that, but it kind of, when you talked about the spam and the score, especially, it made a lot, I felt like it made a lot of sense to kind of stick that in there.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. It's been a while since I've looked at this, but I believe once your score is at a certain threshold, it's really easy for it to go higher, but it's a whole lot harder to get it to go lower. Unless you're just missing something, like you don't have these settings set up, that would impact your score. So the other thing is, this is kind of a industry standard that a lot of folks are requiring this. And DMARC, this is basically dictating what to do if you fail those other things. So, without this, you're really missing you're missing out on these tools if you don't have this set up. One thing I do want to talk about, and honestly, Tanner was aware of this, but in researching the subject, I actually was not aware that there's actually reporting available with this. There's a aggregate report, and there's also a forensic report. Looking at this, the aggregate report, this is something we're going to set up real soon. I'm sure this is something that you're not want to be looking at every single day, but this is something where if you're having issues, you may want to reference, and it would be good to look at this on occasion. So the aggregate report, it has your DMARC results. It's got your DKIM and SPF authentication results. It's got the number of messages sent on a specific date, and it's got all of your sending IP addresses, and also the domain that was used to send messages. And there's a few other things in there as well. And then with the forensic report, it's got the URLs and the delivery results and the ISP information, like who sent those emails. It's got the message ID, and it's also got your authentication results for SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. It's got the email subject field, and it's also got the IP addresses of the sender. That's one of those things where you want to see, people, even if you have these tools set up, people can attempt to emulate or spoof your domain, but they're going to fail unless people just don't have any security at all. But anytime they're emailing Gmail or Hotmail or Microsoft, they've got a lot of checks and they're not going to make it through. So it is possible that they can make it through, but for the most part, that's not going to happen. So anyways, there's a lot more data on those forensic reports, but that's something when you set up that text file in your DNS, you can put an email address for these reports to go to. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I would just to kind of tag along there. We do have that in place, and we don't. I would say we looked at all the reports early on, and we found there's just a lot of spam out there. There you do get quite a few reports. So we kind of move those to another mailbox. So we check if we need to, something like that. But not something that we definitely check every day. But good to know and good to have a check on that, or at least know where you can easily access those that kind of information. So I talked a little bit earlier about a bonus. This is something that's a little new to me. It's something we actually just recently went through, and I don't know that it would apply to every organization. I'm not sure that it's needed particularly, but if your organization does a ton of marketing, and we have a subsidiary company that is in the marketing business. They are competitive, very competitive business. They do a lot of email campaigns and things like that. There's a new product called a verified MARC certificate. So for those that are a VMC, I guess for short. So you guys everyone that's listening, I'm sure is already familiar with this. With different email platforms, I use a Proton Mail email platform personally, but for those that use different platforms, a lot of times the client, either the web client or sometimes the client on the phone, you'll notice that like particular people that email you, they have like a verified logo, and then you'll even see it also in the email itself. And what that is typically, the logo can be a little bit different, but it typically goes hand in hand. That is where they have actually went through this process of a verified MARC certificate. It's not something that is going to automatically protect you or protect people that you're emailing from, getting spam, things like that. But it is one more step. It's more trust step. So to get this is a pretty a serious endeavor, I will say. You have to, for example, I was just taking a look. I remember we've been through this a couple months ago, but to get that into Gmail, you have to obviously do the normal stuff we just talked about, setting up DMARC, all those kinds of things. You have to create SVGs of your logo. You have to get a VMC certificate and associated certificate files, which is very complicated. In our case, it ended up being we had to get someone that was like, I guess, certified at a state level. You had to get either like a notary or a CPA or someone that has like the consequences of losing their licensure to actually verify that you are the company making this request. They had to, it's based a lot on your trademarks, so you have to verify that you're like the owner of the trademarks. That you and the trademarks have to match like exactly. If you've ever like signed over like a title to a vehicle, everything has to be exactly just so. So they looked us up in the trademark organization, the government trademark organization, had to match that exactly. Had to have that authentication from that particular, I guess, certified individual. You have to upload that file to your web server, and then you have to add another text record in your domain. Definitely, kind of an extra step. I don't know that it's, something that every person needs to do, but if you're really looking to kind of, I guess, cement that trust relationship with your emails, it is kind of one of those things that's a little more recent that can even add that extra step. Again, we do a lot of marketing. If your organization does a lot of marketing, you may have already heard about this or you may have already done it, but it's something that I did not know about probably 6 to 8 months ago. It was kind of new to me. I think, like I said, may not be needed, but I think the big thing for me at least was that all these companies are not sitting still as well. Like email spam is a critical issue, and they've implemented these things to help ward it off, but doesn't mean that it eliminates it. But they're not sitting on their heels either. They're actively trying to come up with new ways to potentially make sure that those people we're emailing are more trusting of the emails from us, and the emails that aren't from us stick out a lot more.
Tanner, I think that's pretty interesting. I've seen those logos before, and I really had no idea how it was done. or what it was even called. So that's very interesting. Wait for you to flex on us too by getting your logo added. I've only seen the big players do that, so that's really awesome. And I think it was an interesting point you had with the using a different domain for your marketing. So we do a little bit of that, but we're not doing nearly as much as you guys are right now. But in the future, we're looking to do that. Next year we're gonna set up basically an opted in list. We're going to start going down that process and get members to opt in. We have different contact stuff, but it's mainly for outages. But we're looking to send other things. And anyways, we're going to go down that rabbit hole. And thank you for sharing that. That's something we'll definitely look at, is using a different domain, because the last thing I want is we start marketing folks and maybe we get a few people that don't like it and they're reporting us. And our legitimate, well, I mean, it's all legitimate email, but I would hate for our primary domain to start getting flagged as spam by some mail vendors out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may be kind of unwarranted fear, but to me, it was something pretty simple to do. I mean, domains are very cheap. What we did is we actually got one that was very close. We just used basically the words my and the existing domain we had. So honestly, I don't think we had a single person even call us or ask us about it, because and that maybe that even proves the point. We did change this at one point. It's been many 3 or 4 years back, but maybe that really proves our point, is that is how easy it is. I mean, had we not bought that domain, someone else could have bought that domain and been sending email as that, maybe even and that's something we didn't really talk about, but just having domains that are very close to your domain can also potentially cause you issues, even if you've gone through every single step we talked about. You've done the SPF. You've created those reports. You have everything in place. Someone can still buy a domain that's very close to yours, has like a little bit of a letter. So maybe that's a little bit of another tactic as well. Is if there's something that a different top level domain you need to buy of your existing, or maybe something that's really, really close to your existing website, might be worth going ahead and purchasing that with as cheap as domains are.
This is a little off topic, but it just reminded me, if you're mentioning a domain that you don't own in public, make sure that no one else can hear you. I had a vendor that we work with. Now, this was done in jest, like this isn't, but we were talking about a SCADA domain that we were looking at using, and he went and bought it. So he's gladly going to sell it to us for at cost, but anyways, that was it's really something easy to do. But if you were talking on a public forum or something like that, you really should watch what you say. If you're looking at buying a domain or thinking about a domain that you don't own, because it is real easy to go out there and just buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like there are a lot more kind of different domain enders now. Obviously there's the .coms, .orgs, the one that have been around a long time, but there's .io is like a new one I know that's popped up a lot, at least in the technology world. I don't know if you've noticed that, but sometimes I wonder if we'll ever be able to buy all the ones that would kind of associate somewhere with us. I think the main ones you should definitely own if you don't already own, but some of those other more random ones that pop up, I don't know that there's a lot of benefit there. But I think when we thought about this episode, we were just thinking like, really those three. Obviously, the VMC is kind of a newer thing, maybe not needed, but the core three things that you can do to kind of guard your email security and really guard your trust. I think it's just something you need to do. Like you mentioned earlier, maybe done for you, but it's kind of like cybersecurity with a third-party vendor. You think they're doing it, they say they're doing it, but is anyone verified they're doing it? Yeah, I mean, you have to do that. You don't want to leave yourself vulnerable there. Any final thoughts there around the DMARC, DKIM, or SPF topic?
Yeah, I'll mention again, these are easy to do, but yes, you have to be very careful because you can mess things up if you don't have these set up properly. But there are a couple tools that we'll post in the notes. But the one I'll mention is if you go to DMARCLY.com, and we'll have this, but basically you can send an email from your domain and it'll do a full report on all of these tools and tell you, is everything working as it should? Do you pass? Do you fail? and give you all the details of this. It's a quick check, and I definitely recommend you do it. And I didn't mention this earlier, but years ago I worked with someone, and I told them to set these things up, and they told me they did, and I took it for granted that we were set up, and it was probably 2 years later that we were getting emails rejected from another organization that we deal with, and it was because we didn't have these things set up properly, and they had they had stuff where if you didn't pass all of these, they were blocking them, and rightfully so. So I wouldn't just take for granted that you have this set up, and I would do a check on it. It's very easy to do.
That's a great thought, Anthony. Thank everybody for listening. We really do appreciate everybody that listens on a every other week basis, and then we know we have had some bonus episodes and seen those to be pretty popular as well. If you aren't subscribed to the podcast and you're listening to it on one of the platforms, Apple or Spotify, go ahead and subscribe. That way, whenever we have a new episode, you'll get notified. And make sure to hit the notification, because you can kind of subscribe without being notified. And it'll go ahead and download things, but it's nice so you don't miss any episodes to get that notification. Just a reminder on the giveaway, as we mentioned, pretty easy to do. So review our podcast on any of the different podcasting platforms. Just do it on the one you're using. It's probably the easiest. Share our episode this week on the core 3 email protections there on a social media platform of your choice. And then just email us, show@offthewirepodcast.com. Let us know you did that, and you'll be entered in. We have 3 awesome prizes we talked about a little earlier in the episode. If you have any episode ideas, we're always looking for that. If there's just any feedback, things that you think we should be doing or things you think we shouldn't be doing, just feel free to email us, show@offthewirepodcast.com. Or, feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms, LinkedIn, X, YouTube, Facebook. If you've enjoyed this podcast, share it with someone. There's a lot of people, especially in the small and medium business world, that kind of overwhelmed, and having something that's kind of giving them some extra thoughts or kind of sparking some things for them that they might need to be doing. That's important, and that's what we hope to do with this podcast. We publish every other Monday morning, and sometimes on off week if we do want to do a bonus episode, if there's something particularly kind of breaking that we want to cover. We did that with the CrowdStrike episode, so hopefully you heard that. If you haven't, go back and listen to that. Anthony was in the moment, just came out of his CrowdStrike, nightmare, I guess you might say. So it's a great episode. I thought this one was also a good one. Your thoughts, Anthony?
Yeah, this is another great episode, and hopefully we don't have any more events that we need to do live coverage on that are eventful that impact us specifically. But I will mention just to all the people dealing with the Hurricane Debbie, we had the remnants of that. Tanner and I had the remnants in North Carolina, and we're dealing with that. But anyways, just all those people, be thinking about them, especially with the flooding going on.
Yeah, that's a good point, Anthony. We're always talking about things that, they're really, really critical, but, obviously when natural disasters come through, that's something that, raises that bar even more. So yeah, thinking about those people that went through that, and we had a little bit of impact, but nothing too worrisome. So hopefully there's no more of these out there, kind of lurking. And anyway, thank you to all our listeners. This has been an episode of Off the Wire.